What in the world did we just see on this show? This was the first big WWE show of 2022, and it ends like that with Brock Lesnar becoming the WWE Champion. I did not see that coming, so kudos for catching me off guard because I did not see that coming. That was insane. That was an insane main event. It just, all this crazy action thrown at you, and then boom, over. Brock wins. LOL. All right. Well, welcome everyone to DerekJ Speaks. We are here to give you a recap of the latest WWE show. Can no longer call it a pay-per-view. They have ditched the pay-per-view moniker and they are now calling these premium live events. So the first premium live event for WWE in the year 2022 is WWE Day 1, live from the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, Georgia. A show that looked much different even a few hours before it went on air than what we actually got. Originally, we were supposed to get a main event between Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship, but unfortunately, it was almost about an hour before the show went on air, the kickoff started, that Roman Reigns went public and posted on his Twitter, later confirmed, of course, by WWE, that he tested positive for COVID-19 and would not be able to compete on the Day 1 pay-per-view event. It's hard. I gotta call it pay-per-view. It's gonna be hard to transition into the premium thing name. So, pay-per-view. Roman Reigns would not be able to compete on the pay-per-view because he tested positive for COVID-19. And I just want to say up front that I send nothing but positive vibes and love towards Roman Reigns. This is a very awful situation to be in. This is no joke. This is a very, very shitty disease, and I wish him a quick, speedy recovery and good health. I know he has a lot of love and a lot of support surrounding him from his family, his friends, his peers, and of course, his many, many fans, all rooting for him to get back and be healthy, the healthiest he can possibly be. So, best wishes to Roman Reigns to beat this, fight this, and conquer it, and walk out on top. But, of course, this being WWE, the show must go on. So with the big main event, and it would be the one match that I was really looking forward to on this show, that many people were looking forward to on this show. Damn COVID. But Brock Lesnar was not going to not wrestle on this show, so they made the decision to transform the WWE Championship match, which had already undergone several transformations in recent weeks, from being a singles match to a triple threat to a fatal four-way match. Now it would be a fatal five-way match with the inclusion of Brock Lesnar in that match. They already announced several months ago that Brock Lesnar is a free agent, so he can compete on Monday Night Raw. What sense it makes for him to immediately get a WWE Championship match? It's Brock Lesnar. That's the only explanation I have as far as that's concerned. But with all these guys in this match, you had a feeling it was going to be pretty crazy, and that's exactly what it was. I just could not see that finish coming. I went into this show thinking that Big E had a very good chance of losing his championship. I just did not think it would be in this fashion. But poor Big E, he was done kind of dirty a little bit in this loss here. So we will, of course, get into that as well as the rest of the show. Believe it or not, there was a whole other show that took place prior to this main event, and that show was very much okay. Not everything, some was more than okay, like that opening tag team match, the opening match of the main card for the SmackDown tag team titles with the Usos and the New Day was tremendous. It is damn near impossible for the Usos and New Day to not put on a great match. Tonight was no exception. Had a great one. I thought Liv Morgan impressed in her Raw Women's Championship match against Becky Lynch. I thought that was a great match. As for the other few matches on the show, nothing overly special. They were good. Some of them, one of them went way longer than it had any right to. But the show was elongated and it was stretched out due to the lack of the Roman Reigns match. And they just threw a bunch of video packages for people. They had a bunch more backstage segments and interviews. So I wouldn't call it a great show. I would give it a thumbs up, but not very enthusiastically. It's there. It's probably an Orange Cassidy thumbs up, but whatever. Before I get into the show in full, if you like what you see, if you like what you hear, give this channel some love. Hit that like button, like this video, share it amongst your friends, amongst your families, amongst your peers, amongst your enemies. I don't care. Just share this with everyone that you want to. Comment down below. Give your thoughts on the show, whether you loved it, whether you hated it, how you feel about Brock Lesnar being the champion, how you feel about the way Big E lost it, and anything else from this show. Go ahead, sound off in the comment section and give your thoughts. And if you like this channel, if you want more content like this, then hit that subscribe button. DerekJ Speaks. I consistently post new content to the channel all the time, talking wrestling, talking movies, anything else I want to talk about right here. And speaking of anything I want to talk about, also follow me on Twitter at DerekJ Speaks, where you get even more insight from me on various topics throughout the days and weeks. So let's go ahead and get into this show and start all the way back at the pre-show. A tag team match from SmackDown had the team of Sheamus and Ridge Holland taking on Cesaro and Ricochet. This match is noteworthy because there was a huge injury that took place during this match. We unfortunately had a broken nose, or a seemingly broken nose, in this match. Cesaro and Ricochet performed some type of double team flip. Cesaro helped Ricochet flip over and hit what looked like some kind of moonsault move, basically a moonsault, but the landing was pretty rough because Ricochet landed feet first onto the face of Ridge Holland, just right into his face, right into his nose, and Ricochet, losing his balance, ends up falling downward even more, and Ricochet's shin ended up crushing into the face of Ridge Holland as well. So, bad day at the office for Ridge Holland. He posted a photo on his Twitter later on in the night with tissues up his nose. He looked pretty rough, so best wishes to him too. So Sheamus wrestled the rest of the match basically as a handicap match and still won. Hit the bro kick on Cesaro to get the win. So clearly he and Ridge were supposed to win the match, but instead Sheamus just won by himself. So I guess he's just that great. The main show kicked off with what basically was the best match of the entire night, that being for the SmackDown Tag Team Championships, the Usos defending against King Xavier Woods and his right hand, Kofi Kingston, of course, the New Day. We have seen just about every possible combination of Usos New Day matches for several years now on SmackDown, back and forth. whether it's Kofi and Xavier, Big E and Xavier, Big E and Kofi. We've seen every type of match we can possibly see between these two teams. Very sick of it. But the one thing that has always remained consistent is that these two teams are incapable of having a bad match against one another. And tonight was no exception. This ranks up there as one of their best matches they've had up to this point. And with the Roman Reigns news coming in when it did, and just looking at this card as a whole, and the build-up for it, and the excitement level for it, this show really needed a really, really hot match to spice it up and add a little something to it. They added a lot of something to it with that main event finish, but they needed something match-wise to really capture your attention for this show. And I thought that these guys did exactly that. This was a perfect choice to open the show. They had a tremendous match, and I loved everything about it. The fans, they had these guys in the palm of their hands. Of course, Xavier Woods is from Atlanta, so they had an emotional investment already there. But even as the match continued onward, it started a little slow in the beginning, but it kept building up to a point where it was just feet on the gas, nonstop crazy action from there on out, and the fans loved every single bit of it. But of course, all good things must come to an end, and here we had a finish that saw the Usos retain their tag team titles after they hit Kofi Kingston with a 3D, or as Pat McAfee put it, a 1D, because they the ones. And of course, this is day one, so they are incorporating the Dudley Boys finisher, the 3D, into their arsenal, which is pretty cool. But the finish was never in any doubt. The Usos retaining their tag team titles, continuing to reign as the champions. The bloodline remained strong. So, great stuff. I never have to see another Usos New Day match in my life, but at least I know it will always over-deliver. I mentioned earlier, this show was filled with a bunch of backstage segments, backstage promos, video packages for different people like Big E. There was one for Seth freaking Rollins. I'll get to that a little bit later. And just a bunch of different things to pad out the show and make it go longer. Speaking of making the show go longer, when it definitely did not need to, the next match was Madcap Moss taking on Drew McIntyre. This went way longer than it had any right to. The Madcap Moss character, as currently presented on TV, should not have had this long competitive match with someone like Drew McIntyre, a former WWE Champion, one of the biggest top babyfaces in the entire company, a man who was seemingly being groomed for a future shot at the Universal Championship and Roman Reigns, whether it's at the Rumble, whether it's at WrestleMania, whenever it happens. He is someone who is being groomed for that spot. And to have him go out there and have to struggle putting away Madcap Moss was pretty ridiculous, to say the least. But he did eventually do it. After about 10 minutes, again, you could have shaved a good 5 or 8 minutes off this match for it to be really believable. But still, McIntyre hits the Claymore, gets the win. Later on in the night, we learned that this feud is not over. It is far from over. Drew McIntyre was having an interview. He gets interrupted by Madcap Moss and Happy Corbin, who lay him out. They attack him, and they end up Pillmanizing poor Drew McIntyre. They wrap a steel chair around his throat, and Corbin grabs this steel beam production piece of equipment thing and just slams it onto the chair right into his throat. Later on, WWE provided an injury update on Drew McIntyre, and they listed his injuries as a cervical neck strain with severe contusions, because of course everyone who gets a storyline injury must always suffer contusions. So Drew is injured at the hands of Corbin, because this is clearly a match that needs to be built up. This is a match that will probably happen at the Royal Rumble. Aren't we so lucky? We had more video packages up next, but then after that, we had the Raw Tag Team title match. Randy Orton and Riddle, RK Bro, defending the Raw Tag Team titles against Montez Ford and Angelo Dawkins, the Street Profits. RK Bro came out accompanied by Migos. Migos were originally supposed to have a performance on this show, but I guess that got cut. So they had a backstage segment, and then they came out here to accompany Riddle and Randy Orton. They announced Migos as the greatest group in the world. Not even the greatest rap group or the greatest music group. They called them the greatest group in the world. Period. First of all, I'm sure there's a lot of BTS fans out there that would like to have a word with you as far as that statement is, but they can't keep it simple. They just have to put their own little spin and marketing on everything that makes it sound so ridiculous. Who in the world? But now, maybe there are some people, but the greatest group in the world, I love Migos just as much as anybody. It was very weird hearing straightening on a WWE pay-per-view. That was just very odd. But I love Migos. I ain't gonna call them the greatest group in the world. Just group in general. That was very weird. But to be fair, that was one of the only things that kept my attention throughout this entire match. This was a good match. It was fine. It was nothing compared to that opening match, but it was fine in its own right. The fans were still into it. They were firmly into RK Bro, as always. More so, Randy Orton, again, seemingly always. Every time we see these guys wrestle together, Randy Orton gets the loudest pop. He gets the loudest ovation. They love this guy. There was no exception in this match. I thought the finish was pretty clever. We see Montez Ford have Randy set up in the corner. Ford is on the opposite corner. He comes charging at Randy, but then Riddle, who disposed of Dawkins on the outside, he swoops in and just launches Montez Ford up in the air over his head. And as Ford was coming back down, Randy catches him with an RKO, plants him, big pop from the crowd. 1, 2, 3. RK Bro are still your Raw Tag Team Champions. Finish was never really in doubt here. Pretty much expected RK Bro to walk out as champions, and that's what happened. After the match, all the guys just shook hands, posed together. They posed with Migos, so nice little photo op for all of them. After this, we had the segment with McIntyre and Corbin and Moss. We had a Bianca Belair video package. Brock Lesnar was cutting a backstage interview. Brock has been very entertaining. He also said that he was going to leave as the WWE Champion and that it wasn't a prediction, but it was a spoiler. So, Brock's a man of his word. But the next match was Edge versus The Miz in a feud that I just have not been able to get into. I love Edge. I'm glad to see him back. Edge, it's great to see him. He is cool. He brings an intensity to the ring, to the microphone that not a lot of guys have. Genuine intensity that makes him interesting to see, that makes him cool to see, and makes you want to root for him. I love seeing Edge. Miz, I like The Miz. I've always liked The Miz, but the way they have presented The Miz as a character on TV for the last few years has not been anything interesting or exciting or engaging. At least not to the degree that I care to see him feud with someone like Edge, who does not have a full-time spot on the roster, who does pick and choose when he appears and is very selective in the feuds that he is in, and to have one of those feuds be with The Miz seems a bit of a waste. But they've tried to make the most of it. We had Edge come out with the Brood music. The music had the flames shooting up, all that good stuff. We saw him come out with that against Seth Rollins at SummerSlam, so we see it again here. it's still cool. The Brood's theme music is still one of the best theme songs in the history of professional wrestling, so it is always cool to hear it, even if it's just a snippet of it. The match itself was okay. It was very standard. There was nothing over the top entertaining about it. It was just a regular match. The fans were into it. The fans were firmly behind Edge. Did not like The Miz. Always booed whenever Maurice would try to interfere or cause a distraction of any kind. So your standard heel babyface stuff in this match. Nothing of note happened until closer to the finish, where we see Edge prepare to hit a spear on Miz. He charges at him, goes for the spear. Miz leapfrogs over Edge. Edge collides face first into the turnbuckle in the corner, and Miz comes down, starts to sell that he has tweaked his knee. So the referee comes over, checks on the Miz. Meanwhile, with his back turned to Edge, he does not see Maurice, who's on the outside, slap Edge in the face. Edge gets up. Miz lays Edge out with the skull-crushing finale. It's only good for a 2 count. Then we see Maurice get up on the apron. She's arguing with the referee. And then all of a sudden, we see everyone in the crowd start to look over towards the entrance ramp. Then we see The Miz also point towards the entranceway. We see Maurice slowly turn around. And then, just like that, they cut over and we see Beth Phoenix. She's just there. She's standing there, looking down at the ring, presumably looking at Maurice. Could have also been looking at The Miz. Could have been looking at Edge. Maybe he didn't take the trash out. He didn't do something at home. Who knows who she was mad at. But seemingly she was upset with Maurice. So she's looking down at the ring and she's just standing there. Seconds are going by and she's just standing there looking mad, ready to unleash. And she's not doing anything. She's not moving. And then they play her theme music, finally, and then she makes her way down to the ring. I thought that looked very goofy. I thought the impression is that she needed to be motivated to go to the ring, and her motivation needed to be her theme music playing. I thought that looked very silly and ridiculous, but nevertheless, she did eventually make her way to the ring, and she chased Maurice off. They never really touched. They didn't have any interaction physically. She chased Maurice up the ramp. That's where she stayed. Meanwhile, back in the ring, Edge hits the spear on The Miz and gets the win. And the loving Hall of Fame married couple of Edge and Beth Phoenix celebrate in the ring. So, I assume this is setting up a mixed tag team match at some point in the future. Probably for the Royal Rumble. I personally would prefer they blow that match off on Raw. Seems like you could just build that up as a big TV match. This match on this show felt like a big TV match, so might as well have the mixed tag on TV as well. And then for the Rumble, you can promote the fact that both Edge and The Miz are going to be in the men's Royal Rumble match. And at the same time, you can promote the fact that Beth Phoenix and Maurice will be in the women's Royal Rumble match and build up the fact that Beth and Maurice will collide in the Rumble. And let that be what you do for the pay-per-view. Do the mixed tag on Raw, maybe even the go-home show before the Rumble. But build the Rumble around the fact that these 4 individuals will be in their respective Rumble matches. Or you can just say that the feud is over here. I personally have no issue with that if they wanted to do that. Up next, we got a Bobby Lashley video package, and then that went into the next match for the Raw Women's Championship. Becky Lynch, Big Time Bex, defending the championship against Liv Morgan. This was the big opportunity for Liv Morgan to get a chance to shine on a big stage, a big pay-per-view. She already got a shot at Becky and her title a few weeks ago on Raw. But this was Liv's first big singles championship match on the main card of a pay-per-view. And if this was a test for her to see if she can hang, to see if she can look good in there, and to see if she belongs in that spot, then I thought she passed with flying colors. I thought Liv looked great in this match. Becky did her thing. She looked great, but this was about Liv. This was about making Liv look good. This was about making sure Liv came off like a legitimate contender for that championship. And in this match, more so than any other performance I've seen her in, she came off just that. And the entire story leading up to this match made you believe that it was all designed for Liv to get the win and walk away as the Raw Women's Champion, but that's not what happened. In the end, both women are in the ropes. The referee tries to back Liv off. Becky is still in the ropes, so Liv charges at her, tries to hit her finisher, the Oblivion, coming off the ropes. She goes for the Oblivion, but Becky catches her mid-stride and plants her with the manhandle slam and gets the win. It looked like Becky was trying to get her feet on the bottom rope, but they were a little farther out from the ropes, so I guess she accidentally won clean. So there's not even a storyline reason for Becky to give Liv a rematch here. She beat her clean, she retained her title, and I see no reason for Becky to not walk into WrestleMania as the champion and drop it to someone there. They have already told us that Becky has been champion every single day she has been an active wrestler on the WWE roster. Ever since WrestleMania 2019. That'd be a hell of a run if she's been champion since WrestleMania 19. No, since WrestleMania in 2019, she has been a champion every single day as an active roster member. With that kind of record, with that kind of stat, you are not going to have her lose that championship on a show like Day One. That is tailor-made for WrestleMania. And who is the person to beat her? Could they come back around to Liv Morgan around that time? Possibly, potentially. But the right story to tell for that spot is Bianca Belair. Bianca Belair, who lost her SmackDown Women's Championship in 26 seconds to Becky Lynch at SummerSlam last year, and has pretty much been screwed over in every shot since then. Have her knock down a few pegs, work her way back up, and eventually get that championship match with Becky at WrestleMania. And then that is where you can do the big payoff where Bianca finally beats Becky, ends her reign as champion, and walks out as the winner. Liv Morgan, she proved tonight that she deserves her shot. She can credibly and believably be seen as a Raw Women's Champion. Just that is not something that should happen at this current moment. Maybe later in the year. But for right now, the story that we need to be building to heading into WrestleMania is Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair, and coming full circle to finish off that story, because it needs to be properly concluded, and it needs to happen at WrestleMania. After this match, we had a backstage segment with Seth freaking Rollins. I noticed on WWE.com they had a list of their top 25 matches of the year. Speaking of which, if you are interested in knowing my top 10 best matches of the year in WWE and AEW, NXT, New Japan, all that stuff, subscribe to the channel and look through my previous videos. I just recently posted my top 10 list of my favorite matches of the year. It's been getting a lot of great views and been a very well-performing video, my best performing video of the year. So thank you all to everyone who has clicked on that and enjoyed it. I thank you and love you all for that. But on WWE.com, they were listing their top 25 matches. Every single match that appeared that had Seth Rollins in it, Seth Rollins' name appeared as Seth freaking Rollins. So this is now his new official name. He is now officially rechristened as Seth freaking Rollins. And Seth freaking Rollins ended up in the freaking main event, because that match was up next. The Fatal 5-Way for the WWE Championship. Big E defending that title against Seth freaking Rollins, Kevin Owens, Bobby Lashley, and Brock Lesnar. I mentioned at the top of the video, this was a crazy match. I think my notes pretty much list everything that happened, so I'll go through it here. The bell rings, instant craziness. All kinds of crazy action immediately out the gate. We see Brock Lesnar in the ring with Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens, taking both men to Suplex City, dropping them on the back of their heads and necks with German suplexes. Meanwhile, on the outside, Big E and Bobby Lashley are going at it. Big E eventually finds his way back in the ring and clotheslines Brock outside. Brock's out there, and lying in wait is Bobby Lashley, who spears Brock Lesnar through the security barricade into the timekeeper's area, lays out Brock Lesnar, I should say. Bobby lays out Brock. Meanwhile, Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens, who have formed some type of unholy alliance in recent weeks, they teamed up in this match to dispose of the big guys. They took down Brock Lesnar. Seth Rollins hit a dive outside to the ring, took out Brock. Seth had Brock laid out on the floor, and Kevin Owens, coming off of the apron, delivered a frog splash onto Brock Lesnar. They cleared off the announce table, moved the steel steps over towards the announce table. We're going for a double team move on Bobby Lashley, but Lashley managed to fight them both off, only to end up being planted through that announce table by Big E. Big E ends up getting disposed of. Rollins and Owens ends up hitting a double DDT on Brock Lesnar onto the steel steps. Back in the ring, Kevin Owens and Big E are going at it. Owens hits Big E with a pop-up powerbomb. Owens goes up top, hits a swanton on Big E, and then from an opposite top turnbuckle comes Seth Rollins hitting a splash onto Big E. Then, with Big E in position, Rollins gears up and goes for the curb stomp, but is caught off right by Brock Lesnar, catches him and hits him with the F5. He also hits Big E with an F5, and he hits Kevin Owens with an F5, only to turn around into a spear from Bobby Lashley, who only gets a 2 count. Lashley then locks Brock in the Hurt Lock, and it looks like Lashley's going to start to fade, but then Big E comes back in to break it, gets Lashley up on his shoulders, hits Lashley with the big ending. He gets Brock on his shoulders, hoping to hit him with a big ending as well, but Brock slips out, gets Big E up on his shoulders, hits him with an F5, and 1, 2, 3, Brock Lesnar is the WWE Champion at the start of this new year. Happy New Year, everybody. Brock Lesnar is once again the WWE Champion. Well, I did not see that coming. Like I mentioned, this was a tremendous match, back and forth. Great match. I thoroughly enjoyed it as this crazy, chaotic 5-minute sprint. I swear this match felt like it only went 5 minutes. Maybe it was a little bit longer. Maybe it was about 10, maybe a little less. But it was a blink and you missed it. But like everything that they were doing was just crazy chaos from start to finish. There was no breath. There was no low point. It was just go, 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 bell to bell. And having that come to an end with Brock Lesnar as the champion was very interesting. Poor Big E, I will say, as I mentioned earlier, kind of done a little dirty. His run as champion was very, very disappointing. He just never really caught steam as champion. He never felt like the prominent figure on Monday Night Raw. He was never positioned as the guy, which is understandable only because Roman Reigns is the guy. He is the only guy who is presented as anything special on the entire roster between both shows. But even on Raw, there's a way to position Big E as your WWE Champion as being just as important to that show. Something that they did a pretty good job of doing with Drew McIntyre when he was champion, and did even better job with Bobby Lashley when he was champion. But they never really did that with Big E. He has not really been prominently featured on the show. He's had several matches on television where he's lost and been pinned, whether it be to Bobby Lashley. He got pinned by Roman Reigns at Survivor Series. So already not the best run for him as champion, and for it to come to an end on this show this way, it's very disappointing to see, to say the least. But I don't know what to say. I expected him to lose the championship, if not on this show, at some point before WrestleMania, because I just did not see Big E walking into WrestleMania as the champion. With the kind of run he was having, no, I did not see that coming. I just didn't think he would lose that title to Brock Lesnar. So now the question becomes, what are they going to do? The next stop is the Royal Rumble, and that firmly establishes us on the road towards WrestleMania. So what's the direction going to be for all these guys? I think Rollins and Kevin Owens, if neither one of them were going to walk out of this show as champion, I don't expect either one of them to get that title. So maybe they can keep the partnership going. Maybe the two of them can be the ones to team up and go up against RK Bro at WrestleMania and take those Raw Tag Team titles, and we get some kind of crazy duo of Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens as the tag team champions. So I don't factor them into any world title contention heading into WrestleMania. As for everyone else, Big E lost, so what's next for him? Could he regain the title before WrestleMania and still walk in as champion? It's possible. I just don't see it happening. Could he win the Rumble and get back into the championship picture that way? I can believably see that. I can see him challenging for that championship at WrestleMania, whether it be against Brock or Lashley, or even going over back to SmackDown to challenge Roman. Many moons ago, I pitched for Big E to be the man to build up as being the one to eventually take that championship away from Roman Reigns. There's some drama that can still be there, but since they already did the match at Survivor Series and Roman Reigns beat Big E clean, there's not much in the way of drama for that match. So that's kind of a wash. I want to point your attention to what happened after the match on this show. Brock wins the championship. He's celebrating in the ring. Everyone else is basically laid out except for Bobby Lashley, who is on the outside. He's standing up. He's going to leave with MVP, but he's looking back at the ring. And the camera focused on Lashley, looking up in the ring at Brock and looking back at Brock. And they made a point to focus on Lashley and his face. And that looked like a very subtle, yet blaringly obvious tease of an eventual match between Bobby Lashley and Brock Lesnar. This is a match that many people, myself included, have been begging and pleading to see on WWE television for years now. Ever since Bobby Lashley returned to the company, we have been begging to see this match. Could we be seeing it? It's possible. We could see it at the Royal Rumble. We could also see it at WrestleMania. What if Brock walks into WrestleMania as the champion? What if Bobby Lashley wins the Royal Rumble and we get Lashley and Brock at WrestleMania? Those are all big possibilities. What about Roman Reigns? Roman Reigns, of course, was not on the show because of COVID, but he will be back eventually. I would imagine he would be able to make it in time for the Royal Rumble, supposing and figuring that his recovery will be nice and easy. I assume he'll be back soon, so he'll have to be factored in. There's an entire story there with him and Brock and Paul Heyman that is completely left open-ended. It's completely open and needs a conclusion. Meanwhile, Brock is over here winning the championship on Raw. You would think that this story needs to conclude some way. Now, an obvious onlooker would think we'll get a champion versus champion match at WrestleMania, unify the belts, get one champion going across both brands, or just end the brand split altogether. I saw that posted by a few people on Twitter. I don't see them doing it. I think they like having their brand split, as nonsensical as it is. I think they still like having it, and they still like having two champions. It's possible, but I don't see it happening. I could see a scenario, circling back to the Lashley thing, where at the Royal Rumble, we get Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley for the WWE Championship, and Bobby Lashley beats Brock Lesnar, but does so due to interference from Roman Reigns and or the Usos and or Paul Heyman. They screw Brock Lesnar out of his championship. He loses it to Bobby Lashley, and then later on in the night, Brock comes back out, wins the men's Royal Rumble, and the story becomes, what's he going to do? Is he going to try to get back the belt that he just won and lost against Bobby Lashley? Or is he going to go back to SmackDown and take the Universal Championship away from Roman Reigns and get his revenge that way? And then that sets up Brock facing Roman at WrestleMania for the Universal Championship and taking that title away from Roman Reigns. Would Brock Lesnar be my guy to be the one to beat Roman Reigns? No. But there ain't nobody else outside of Drew McIntyre who can believably take that championship from Roman Reigns, which is no one's fault but their own, that being WWE, of course, in terms of their piss-poor attempts of building up anyone else with credibility outside of Roman Reigns. It's sad. It's sad when you look at that SmackDown roster, how little credible stars there are on that show. Even after whoever beats Roman does beat Roman, what's left outside of Roman Reigns as far as challengers, as far as interesting challengers for the Universal Championship are concerned? The well runs pretty dry in that regard. But that's where I see things going. What about you? How do you see things working out? Like I said before, leave your comments down below. Share your thoughts on this show and where you see things going forward, where you see things heading into the Royal Rumble, where you see things heading into WrestleMania. And as always, if you like what you see, like what you hear, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, follow me on Twitter at DerekJ Speaks. We're in for a great year, and I'm very confident that we are going to have a lot of fun. And I am very, very interested in seeing how all of this is going to play out. So, thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.